Alright.
Hello guys, welcome to another edition of Extra. As always, we bring you fresh news from the street. I'm your host, Wanambisi. Today we are going to discuss about how people are surviving or coping during this coronavirus pandemic. That has adversely, for sure, it has adversely affected almost every single country in the world. Joining us on our panel, just a sec. Joining us in our panel today, we have Mariam, who's in the UK, and that's
Hello.
Mariam in the UK. We have also on the same panel, we have Juliet from Uganda.
Hi.
Then we also have Jane, who's based in the US.
And hi, everyone.
And we also have Cecilia, who's based in Kenya. So we are going to start this conversation right away. And at the moment, you can participate on the program. You can participate by sending questions or opinion through the chat box. If you have questions or opinions that you want to share with us, kindly use the box. You also, if you wish to appear live, kindly comment with your WhatsApp number and we will add you to the discussion right away. So, Mariam, kindly tell us what is the current situation in the UK? How's the situation in the UK at the moment?
The situation is not looking good. We're at 16,509 deaths. We had about 1,000 yesterday, and we think that we haven't yet reached our peak. But the trajectory is not good. On the good news side, our Prime Minister is out of hospital and he has recovered. But after a very difficult 2 weeks, the country's under lockdown, but it's not a severe lockdown. So people are it's not like other countries where you're not allowed to go out. You still are allowed to go shopping and you're still allowed to go and exercise. And so people are just getting about their daily existence, but staying at home.
Nice. Juliet, how's the situation in Uganda at the moment?
In Uganda, okay, we do not have any death tolls currently. We are grateful for that, but we have 56 cases. Yesterday we had 55, but we got one that was confirmed at around 11 p.m. And it is not a total lockdown. People are still moving, but there is curfew, very strict curfew. You're not supposed to move without any reason. So I don't know how we can categorize it. You are supposed to stay at home and only go make any movements where necessary, hospital, maybe the market, and the means of transport, all of them have been shut down apart from a few, like trucks that bring in cargo, and then personal cars for those people who are working, like media houses, and you're supposed to be having a sticker. And also, what else? The good news is we have so far 38 recoveries, and people are really trying to adhere to the rules, though it's hard, but the government has really tried its level best. Yeah.
Thank you for that one. And I would like also to ask Jane, currently, how are things in the US as things stand as of now? How are things in the US?
Well, I mean, I think in comparison, the US is far worse off than any of these other countries. We have about almost 800,000 cases confirmed, with 42,000, almost 43,000 deaths. I am currently in Brooklyn, New York, where we have about 240,000 cases confirmed. And we have about, in New York City, 136,000 cases and 10,000 deaths. So
Okay.
it's a whole other exponential level partly due to, I would say, the failure to actually do effective testing in the beginning and to put measures in place to ensure that people were actually isolating from one another.
And is there freedom of movement at the moment? Are people moving? Is there a curfew? Is there a lockdown?
There is freedom of movement. There's certainly, in terms of the stores and the hours of operation, some curfews, but in New York itself, and where I'm living, there's not a curfew. I know that there are other states, places in Florida and California where there have been curfews and mandatory lockdowns.
Okay. And I would also, our third guest has gone offline, but I hope she will be back as we continue with this broadcast. So, Mariam, can you say that the situation is under control in your country? Can you say that the government is doing enough to make sure that the situation is under control?
We don't know much about the virus, so we don't know what to expect going forward. In terms of hospital capacity, there's still they've set up military hospitals, and we have an additional 4,000 beds available, so we're not at capacity. There's been a drop in other kinds of health concerns, so people aren't going to hospitals as much for for example, since bars are closed, there's not as many drinking and driving accidents. There's less bar fights. There's fewer day-to-day injuries. So the hospitals have been relieved by that. And a lot of the slogan and a lot of the narrative, most of the narrative around staying at home has been stay at home, protect the NHS. The NHS is the National Health Service of the UK. And they've been able to rally the country around that slogan, and they've been able to control the situation because of that, because of people's love for the National Health Service. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's nice. I can see the government is really trying. Cecilia, I don't know if you can hear us. Cecilia? I think she still has a connection problem at the moment. So, kindly, Jen, what is the how are things in the US? Is the situation under control or is it out of control?
That's the question of the day. I think it depends on where you are. I think overall the situation is not under control, both in terms of messaging, and it's interesting what Mariam was saying about the UK. It's just that I think there's been certainly kind of maybe it's harsh to say, but like a failure in terms of messaging from the national government, from the federal government, and the Trump administration. So much to the point where you have states in which people are protesting their right to be able to circulate freely and not have businesses shut down and quote unquote get a haircut. And so really not realizing the impact of this virus and the spread of the virus, and at the same time putting increasingly more people's lives at risk. In Florida recently, in the past week, they reopened up the beaches, as well as opening up public spaces in Georgia, both of which, it was really kind of terrifying to think about the consequences in terms of how many more people will be infected and how many people have already lost their lives, including healthcare workers, because people have just not been taking it seriously. And that comes down to the government really being able to earn trust and have people believe that what they're saying.
Okay. And Juliet, can you say that the situation is under control in Uganda?
The situation, okay, I would love to credit the government that they have really tried their level best. Though this virus was new, it just bombarded and took all of us by surprise. But the government has really put in effort to see that the measures that were put in place are actually being followed. For example, like I said, all the transport means have been abolished apart from a few. So everyone is supposed to walk. If you can't walk, then get a bicycle. It also has a time where you're supposed to stop riding it, a motorcycle, all the means that are in place have specific times, have their own curfew. So
Hello.
when
Imagine
hello,
nakuona lakini sioni ukiongea.
I'm talking.
Okay,
Unanisikia?
yes, I can hear you.
So as I was saying, that the government has really tried its level best to make sure that the set rules and regulations are being adhered to by the public. The people have been supportive. The Ugandans have been supportive to a greater extent, I can say so. People have really tried to follow the guidelines, sanitizing, washing hands. Though most businesses were locked down, um, it was for our own good. We came to realize and harmonize with that. So in Uganda, the situation, I can say it's under control for the meanwhile, because the government is really trying its level best. Whenever we hear of a new case, the president comes on to address us and maybe bring in the new measures that are going to be taken into account. Because I know as a country we are small, unlike the US and the UK, we do not have enough facilities in case the cases continue increasing. So the government has tried to curb this thing while it's still at the lowest bottom levels. So now, like transport, we can no longer move. If you are restricted in Kampala, stay in Kampala. Going to the market, there are food specific measures. They call them SOPs, standard operation points, like you're supposed to wash your hands, keep a distance from your friend, go one by one. Even the person selling, there's a mark you're given to show that this person really carried out the measures before entering the market. And if you do not have it, then no one will sell to you. So I have a feeling that even as Ugandans, we have put this in practice for the love of it. We've heard about other countries, we've heard about the deaths, and we do not want the same thing to happen to us. So I would say the government has put it under control, and it has also gone in place to it has gone far to solicitize like means of it has gotten support from different people, and they're giving back to the people who are needy, who cannot manage during this pandemic. And for the far that we have gone, I say kudos, the government has really tried.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I don't know if Juliet, you can, not Juliet, Cecilia, you can hear us right now. Hello, Cecilia.
Yes,
You can hear us.
yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So
Can you
this
hear me?
is yes, we can see you. This is Cecilia from Kenya.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
we can see you. Hi.
Yes,
This
I
is
can.
Cecilia from Kenya. Cecilia, kindly, can you tell us the situation in Kenya at the moment? How is the situation in relation to coronavirus? Hello, Cecilia.
Hi.
Hi, can you tell us the situation in Kenya in regards to coronavirus at the moment?
I can hear you breaking.
I'm saying, can you hear me now?
You're breaking. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. I wanted to know the situation in Nairobi or in Kenya in the moment to do with the coronavirus. How's the situation?
The situation is in Kenya. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can. Yes. I think as Cecilia tries to fix her connection, we can perhaps go on a bit. Now, are the numbers in your countries, respective countries, are the numbers increasing or are the numbers decreasing? I will start with Uganda. Juliet, are the numbers increasing or are the numbers decreasing?
I can't say for sure, but they are not increasing at a high rate. You can find like one case after a day, after a week. And like I said earlier, the good news is that we have more recoveries than the number of cases that are being detected. So the numbers are not increasing at a very threatening rate.
Okay, that is good to hear. I can see the government is really trying.
Yes.
Bring in Mariam. Mariam, are the numbers increasing or are the numbers decreasing in the UK?
The numbers are increasing. We haven't reached our peak yet. We're not quite sure how high they're going to go. And there's a suspicion that the numbers are being downplayed because they're reporting on hospital deaths. So since there's insufficient testing and we're only getting the report on hospital deaths, we have no idea of actual numbers. The numbers could be twice as much if we take into account the people that are dying in residential homes. The other thing about it is that we cannot know numbers unless there's widespread testing. And there's an over focus on people that have symptoms. So not that are asymptomatic right now. But since this is a new virus, we don't actually know what are the long-term effects of the virus. Similar to HIV, you may not have any symptoms today, so you may not go in to get tested, but that doesn't mean that those problems won't occur in the future. And so, yeah, that's where we're at in the UK, but we expect 60% of the population to be contaminated.
Okay. And then I would also like to ask the same question. Are the numbers increasing or are the numbers decreasing? And one thing that I would like to note about the United States is that I've seen reports whereby there are cases whereby they are saying the numbers that are being projected out by the government, some of those numbers include people who have died of other ailments. Perhaps might you be having an idea why is it being done like so compared to other countries that where, like for instance in Kenya, we can say that the numbers that are being projected are those of the people who are dying from the virus. But in the United States of America, we've seen cases being reported where by the numbers that are being projected by the government include numbers of people who have died from other ailments. Perhaps you have an idea on that?
I think to follow on with what Mariam was saying, one of the things is about, what level of testing are we able to get to really have an idea of how many people have actually been infected. I think in terms of the projections with regards to how many people will probably end up having had some variation of COVID, we're looking at 60, 70% of the population. Now, that also means that people are reacting to it at different degrees. So you have people that are what they call asymptomatic, who are carriers, but really you're not able to tell. So they don't have the loss of smell, taste that others have been reporting on, shortness of breath, etc., but milder symptoms. Now, that can also be impacted by, at the time that they were infected, the person who infected them, what level they had, as well as their own personal immunization capacity. In terms of the numbers reporting, I'm not really sure, but I think one of the things is trying to look at COVID-related deaths. So what you have is high risk factors, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer survivors, any kind of person with autoimmune deficiency disease. So who are older age, any of those people who might have fallen victim and died because of a kind of complication related to getting the virus and their own health levels at the time.
Okay. And also, I would also like to ask, what kind of impact has the virus had on social life, generally the social life, given how the country operates and how people relate? How has it? What kind of impact has the virus caused on social life, on people in the United States?
Well, I think the number one factor that you can think of is in terms of the economy. You've had a kind of high percentage of people losing their jobs, and in the United States, because it's also usually people link their employment is linked to their healthcare provider, so they've also lost their healthcare access. You also have a major disruption, the closing of schools for the rest of the semester, leading into the summer, potentially into the fall, the cancellation of many, many activities and events, including, on the political spectrum, debates. I think it's had a profound kind of impact with regards to thinking about this upcoming election year. I think that there's also been a huge impact in terms of how we relate to each other. What we see as essential workers now, not only healthcare providers, but as well, the grocery there's a grocery store, cashiers, the baggers, the delivery people, like all of these people, play a really important role right now in our society because they're helping us. And the people who are trying to stay at home and trying to kind of slow down the spread of the virus with the access to essential goods and services that we need.
Okay, and Mariam, I would also like to ask the same question. What kind of impact has the virus had on the social life of people?
It's very interesting. So in England, in the United Kingdom, the staff have been furloughed, which means that the government will pay 80% of the salary of anybody that's working for a small business. And the guidelines, well, initially was for small businesses. The guidelines weren't very clear. So some millionaires and football teams trying to jump onto the furlough scheme. Notably Liverpool Football Club and Tottenham Football Club, and then Arsenal Football Club said, look, we will pay for our own staff. We're not going to use the taxpayer furlough scheme. And the society reacted very strongly against who uses this scheme and who doesn't. Victoria Beckham tried to also applied for the furlough scheme, and since yesterday, everybody's on TV condemning her for not putting her money where her mouth is. So the society is really trying to pull together. I live in a town called Bedford. We have a 100-year-old man who's walking laps in his garden and has raised 20 million pounds for the National Health Service. And everybody in our community has joined there's volunteer groups that belong to every postcode, and the county council supports the volunteer groups. I know somebody that was in self-isolation, and they said that they received 2 phone calls daily, one from the county council and one from their volunteer group to see if they were okay and if they needed something. Every Thursday evening at exactly 7 o'clock, everybody goes out onto the streets and claps and plays instruments for the NHS. And so there's been an immense amount of pulling together. I think it's seeing people at their finest, but it's also seeing people at their worst. And it's really a time where society is reevaluating what are its values, and similar to what Jane said, like who is essential in society, and how people are behaving right now is very important to everybody.
That's good. And I would also want to ask, in Juliet, I want to ask, what kind of impact is the coronavirus pandemic having on the mental status of people in Uganda? What kind of situations are they finding themselves? How are they affected mentally? Now we are talking in terms of mental health.
This pandemic, the outbreak, it really affected people at first negatively. I'll use at first because Ugandans know how to cope. So with now, like where we have reached, people have already started coping up. But initially, all of us were mentally perturbed at first to a greater extent, because once the president heard about the first case in Uganda, he announced that schools were supposed to stop. So he announced on Friday, was it, I think, and gave us 2 days to leave. So it was so hard at first because most people who we were studying from different regions. In Uganda, we have regions, we have Eastern, Western, Northern, and Southern. So you might find someone from the South studying in the Western or maybe the central part of Uganda, and that was going to be hard. And when these people heard about this, the people who work in the transport industry, they first of all took advantage of the opportunity and they hiked the prices of fare from one place to another, from one region to another. So it was just, it took us by shock. You call a parent, you tell them, I'm supposed to come home on such a date. They tell you, let me look for the money. By the time they look for the money, eventually the transport has hiked. So everyone was in tension. The pressure was so high for most of us, to the extent of some people had to first of all request that the president add just some more days, which was not possible because he said, I've already given you what is enough. And it was so unfortunate for the international students, those ones studying in Uganda from different countries. It was really hectic, stressing, because now they could not make it home because of the transport hiking and so forth. You had to look for somewhere to stay for the meanwhile. And when we went back home, for those who had people around Kampala, it was okay. But now there was this mental distortion because now most people, we had left our families far. Imagine I'm in Kampala trying to cope. I don't know whether this pandemic will end. My mother is somewhere else. She's worried. My brother is in another place. They're worried. So that kind of distortion. And what made matters worse was after the president announcing that the schools should close, after the 3 days were done, he stopped all means of transport that go in far places, in remote areas, so that he can curb the spread from that city to the rural areas. So at first, Ugandans reacted like in a very harsh way because they felt like they were being pressed. Everyone was on pressure, and we all of us felt it. But with time, we got to realize that it was for our own good. The president went on helping, the government came together. They decided to help the few that, especially the students, international students, they got for them a place and catered for them. And then with time, all the tension started like going down slowly. And Ugandans got to know that Corona is real and we have to just cope with whatever situation. But I've liked how the community is responding. Amidst all this, people are being encouraged to help one another. If I have, check on your neighbor. Are you okay? Do you have what to eat? And if you don't have, let's share the little that we do. So now, currently, mentally, it was negative, but now it's positive. We are kind of going up slowly.
Okay, Mariam, perhaps you can use yourself as an example. How has the pandemic really affected you mentally? Because now we understand that people are confined in their homes most of the time. How has it affected your mental health as an individual?
It took me a few weeks to get into a proper routine and to figure out how to use my time constructively, because the days started to roll into one. Then this is a comment to Juliet. I did see your president's exercise videos on how to exercise in your bedroom. I saw Museveni's exercise videos. And then I thought, if he can exercise in his room, I can exercise in my room. No, I think that it's about finding a routine, making sure that you have your objectives for the day, that you meet them, trying to stay healthy, and just making sure that I stay connected. I'm volunteering in my neighborhood. So if old people need a phone call, or if there's people that need some deliveries, I make myself available, and just try to do what needs to be done, and stay connected to family and friends. And it's about finding a rhythm.
Okay, and perhaps now we can ask Jen exactly how has the situation affected you mentally? Were you prepared for it, or it just found you off guard?
Well, I think what's interesting for me is that I moved from one country to another. So I was living in Santiago, Chile, when things just started really mounting with regards to lockdowns and kind of global awareness about the pandemic in March, and moved to back home to Brooklyn, New York, where I'm originally from, into my childhood home with my mother and my aunt, her sister, and my husband, actually. And so it's been an interesting thing being in my kind of childhood home, but in a very different kind of circumstance. I was quite used to working remotely, and that's what I've been doing for a while. But I think working remotely when I'm by myself in an apartment is quite different than working remotely with all these other people, and also kind of renegotiating space. But one of the things that's been really powerful is this tradition, as Mariam was talking about. Every night at 7 p.m. going to clap and bang pans, kind of in praise of and really in recognition of all of those that are out there, the healthcare workers and the other essential workers. That really has built like a sense of community, and I think that mentally that's been really helpful, because it can be one of those things where you either bury yourself in work, or you feel kind of drowned, or you feel overwhelmed with the days. So having that connection has been really powerful. And even yesterday, my mom and I took a walk, and just walking back and around that time and seeing others participating, it makes you feel, part of community, and that's super important. And I feel very lucky to be in my kind of childhood space, a very comforting space during this moment, on top of all of that, and to be able to care for both my mom and my aunt, who are in the senior citizen age, close to the 70s and over 70, and kind of provide that kind of support. My aunt is a healthcare worker who just returned back to work after a week in quarantine. And so, yeah, that's been really helpful for me.
Okay. I would also wish to ask, what kind of support, is there any sort of support that the government is giving out to the people in these trying times?
There's supposed to be a relief kind of fund coming with kind of income tax returns. It's been quite unclear as to who will be kind of benefiting and what that benefit will kind of look like on the one hand. And then there's supposed to be, for small businesses, the ability to apply for also relief funds. But again, that's kind of turned into actually a first come, first serve for large corporations and companies that for a lot of people don't really need it and haven't been behaving as kind of responsibly and as essentially as the small businesses that have really suffered. I mean, if you walk around, you see that can be the kind of depressing part of a lot of businesses have just had to close down their doors, restaurants included, but clothing stores, just everyday businesses that haven't been able to survive through this moment.
Thank you on that. Juliet, what kind of support are you guys receiving from the government?
Okay, the government solicited for support from different organizations and then manufacturing associations in Uganda, and they decided to give back the support to the people. So they are giving out food in form of pasho and beans, but this food is only targeted to those people who actually stay in urban areas and who really like earn a daily living out of the businesses that were closed. So the people who are far, like in rural areas, the government did not like look at them so much because they believe that those people carry out farming. And I think given the amount that the government received and what it was able to do with it, it was only able to budget for a few people who live within towns and who cannot really make a living because of this lockdown and so forth. So people have been receiving posho, people have been receiving maize flour, sorry, and then beans. Actually, that's the major support that the government has been giving to the different families that were really affected by this pandemic.
Okay, Mariam, any sort of support from your government? Your mic is off, Mariam.
Sorry, the government has a very generous scheme where they're looking at your income returns for the last 3 years and matching it for small businesses and so they'll pay that money out for 3 months. All employees are paid by the government at 80%, capped at £2,500. So that's quite generous. Like I mentioned earlier, some larger multinational corporations, some football clubs tried to jump onto the furlough scheme. However, that was quickly shot down by public opinion. The talk show host just went on a rampage about that, and they through. So the football clubs and some of these corporations withdrew their request to be part of the scheme. There's a lot of pressure on government to also take a 20% pay cut. They haven't yet agreed to do that. I know that Rwanda is doing that, and some other governments are doing that. I think New Zealand's doing that as well. And so they're putting pressure on the UK government to share the burden with everybody. So for right now, there is a very generous support package, but we don't know how long that will last. And that doesn't extend to people that are involved in the gig economy. So the people that are complaining right now are people like Uber drivers, self-employed consultants. They're having a hard time accessing this financial package, and they're being put on a scheme called Universal Credit, where everybody gets a minimum amount of money, regardless of their circumstances, to be able to buy food and groceries.
Thank you for that. I would also like to ask, do you feel that there's enough information being offered about the virus in your country? Do you feel that people are receiving enough information on how to stay safe? Are they also on the same? I would also like to ask, are people adhering to the directives that are being given out by the government?
We have a daily briefing at 5 p.m. every day by the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister himself has been unwell, so these are chaired by either the Secretary of Health or the Chancellor of the Exchequer, so the equivalent of our Finance Minister. And he's accompanied in these briefings by one of the chief scientific advisors and different rotating people, either people related to public security and or somebody else from the Home Office. So in terms of adherence, we've seen people beginning to adhere. It took a while. We had a very sunny Easter weekend, and it was difficult for people to stay at home. Houses in England are small, and especially in London. So in the countryside, there isn't such a difference here. But in London, it's been challenging. However, according to the last briefing that we received from the Home Office, was that the number of people adhering has gone up. There's fewer people in the streets. The Chief Medical Officer of Scotland went to her country home a couple of weeks ago, and for that reason, she had to actually resign. So people are being held accountable, and not just people, day-to-day people, but also politicians, public profile people. Everybody's being held accountable. You cannot go further from you can't go out for more than an hour.
Okay, thank you for that, Mariam. I will ask Jen, what kind are you guys experiencing this panic, a frenzy? Because the minute it was announced that in majority of the countries, the minute it was announced that the virus has reached the country, I'll use Kenya for example. We find that people start panic buying. There's this panic that everyone enters into a frenzy and starts shopping. Are you guys experiencing such kind of panic among the public? And if there is, what kind of products are people really stocking?
I think in March, when the announcements were first made, you found a lot of panic buying across the United States. So you found people hoarding cleaning supplies and toilet paper. And what was the response was basically stores having to come up with policies to limit hoarding. One item of toilet paper per customer, and also just limiting the amount of people that could come in and out of stores. What I've definitely noticed in terms of the slowdown has been, implementing the 6-foot rule between people, and stores actively kind of setting that up. I think people have definitely slowed down with regards to the panic shopping. But the United States is a country of mass consumption, and so certainly certain sites, Amazon included, had to kind of make priorities in terms of items that healthcare workers needed. So masks were being bought up, and at the end, those now have kind of a healthcare status on those online sites to prioritize for healthcare providers being able to get access.
Nice. I would also like to refer this question to Mariam, and I'd like to ask: do you feel like, given that the virus broke out in 2019, December 2019, do you feel like people were in a position, or were they well prepared for the situation in case it got to their countries? Do you think there was enough time for people to start preparing, or do you feel like people just got ambushed by the virus? Do you feel like in terms of how they will plan their lives, in terms of shopping, in terms of savings, were they well prepared to handle such a virus?
People were not well prepared because there was mixed messaging from the government in the beginning. They didn't take it seriously till mid-March. It's only recently that the country has started to take the virus seriously. For a long time, we had people in media saying that this was like the flu. People weren't sure how seriously to take it. And even when they started to see the death rates in Italy, they still didn't think it would happen to them. It's only when the numbers started to grow at home is when people took it seriously. So I think had people taken it seriously from 2019, there was time to prepare. But given that there was mixed messaging from the government, people were ill prepared. The hospitals lack protection equipment. There's just it was very, very ill prepared. Clearly we're not prepared for a pandemic like this.
Okay, and I would like to ask Jen, do you feel recently we saw Trump withdraw funding for WHO, which is the World Health Organization? Do you feel they played a part in sensitizing people, especially to do with the preparedness for the virus? Because one of the things Trump pointed out was that the World Health Organization did not warn the world or other nations in time about the disease, but rather downplayed it to say that it was not a pandemic but an epidemic. Do you feel like the WHO did less in time of need?
I don't think I would kind of confuse the two. I mean, I think that previous to this epidemic and this moment, the Trump administration has shown that they're not interested in participating in, I guess, international organizations or participating in continuing to contribute to international agreements. And so I think this is just kind of in the line of that and part of the blame game. Certainly in terms of how countries reacted and information that we were getting, there's perhaps enough blame to kind of go around, but I think that the WHO was a real leader in recognizing at the point where they needed to kind of raise the alarms on a global scale and getting people and governments to understand the what needed to kind of I guess the warning signals that needed to be out there so that their citizens and they could put in measures to stop widespread travel, which was not being regulated at all, and any kind of testing for any people at different ports of entry. So I wouldn't put that on the WHO. I think that's just part of kind of the reality of American politics in this day and age under this administration.
Okay, thank you for that. Mariam, what are your thoughts about the role that the WHO played, especially in warning the world about the pandemic? What are your thoughts?
I think that the role that the WHO played was weak. I think I agree with Jane that the current administration is trying to use them as a blame game, and they're not interested in international organizations anyway. But I think that the WHO did not raise the signals in a timely manner. I think that China, unfortunately, does dominate WHO. I think that the WHO should review Taiwan's membership. I think they should have looked at what was happening in Taiwan. I think that they, for a long time, rejected closing travel to China. They didn't send in experts. However, it's also not their fault that they couldn't send in experts because they are dependent upon China agreeing to have their experts on the ground. However, they insisted that they had confidence in the Chinese numbers. We now know those numbers were incorrect.
Okay, and I will go back to Jane. Jane, I've seen the numbers in the US, they have really skyrocketed. What might be the cause why the numbers are really going up in the US, given that we saw countries like Italy, and we also saw the countries like Spain, they had the numbers going up, but the rate that US has overtaken the rest of those nations, it is really alarming. They are almost hitting the 800,000 mark of infections. What is really fueling that?
I think for the first part, as we talked about earlier, there was not testing being done. I mean, I can personally say that I flew into the United States twice in the month of March, and at neither of those moments, at either Miami International Airport or at Houston International Airport, did anyone ever provide me with any information regarding coronavirus or even check my temperature, which was done actually in both Haiti and in Chile. So, I think one of the things is that in not getting testing out, not having tests available or FDA approved after currently, and then afterwards still making those not available to people generally and kind of limiting it to people that could afford it or had some kind of status. And then the reality of not having clear messaging from the government. So, really being kind of in denial about this and calling it a hoax from the Trump administration side, dropped the ball. And so you have a lot more people that probably should have been tested, were coming from places that they should have been tested from, and given some kind of surveillance over, and then have a situation in which you still to this day have people out in the streets protesting, as I said, for their right to go out and socialize and continue business as usual. And that is not helping. So you had massive youth going to Florida over spring break, despite the fact that we knew the kind of reality of the situation, and we knew that the numbers were going up and the rate of infection. So all of those things have further aggravated and have created a situation where, with a population of 350 million, the numbers will probably continue to go up.
Okay, and we've seen a unique case of people who still don't believe that the virus is real. We have people who have come up with conspiracy theories, even given that the numbers have been rising by the day. We still have people who still see this as a way of the government controlling them. We have people who believe that the virus has something to do with the 5G technology. We have some who feel that this is an opportunity being used by governments to microchip people. Mariam, what advice will you give such people?
I don't know. I mean, I think the virus is real. We just need to accept that the virus is real. Is the government going to use that as an opportunity to increase their control? Yes, they might. But I think that the two things should be kept separate. I think that we shouldn't feed into the narrative that an authoritarian state would be better equipped to handle a pandemic response. I don't think that's the narrative that we should be feeding into. And I think we should be resisting microchipping everybody and tracking everybody. I think that's something that we should not buy into, but I think that we should listen to government guidelines about keeping the social distancing, maintaining our 2-meter distance, not going out, washing your hands, coughing into your elbow, and wait and see. I think we have to wait for the scientists to give us some medicine or some virus, and we need to get more information about what are the long-term effects of this virus, when is this virus going to go away. There's a lot of unknowns, so I understand why people find it hard to believe that it's something real, but unfortunately it is real and we need to believe it.
Okay, thank you, Mariam. Jane, I would also like to ask the same question. I've seen in the US, we're seeing people demonstrating. They are not observing the social distancing rules. They are not observing the protocols or even the directives being given out by the government. What do you feel, or what would you tell people who are downplaying the threat of the coronavirus?
I would tell them that, and I think this has been part of the messaging, but maybe they haven't realized it. It's that, this is not only about our own personal health, but obviously about our ability to protect others in our community, and to really show that we kind of abide by some kind of social contract in which we do not wish to put at risk those that might be more vulnerable, either be it because they are elderly or they've been, sick with some kind of disease that has a higher risk factor, or just the fact that, the coronavirus and the kind of implications with regards to our economy, but also kind of our way of life, also impacts people who are victims of violence within their homes, who may not be able to leave any longer because of the difficulty with regards to the stay-at-home guidelines, and are not finding kind of outlets. And so, really rethinking about, not only is this about keeping myself and my family safe, but it's really about, respecting the fact that we live in community, and that we need to be able to step up to ensure that we're able to protect one another.
Thank you very much, Jen. And perhaps as we come to the end of the show, I'd also ask to you guys, perhaps what kind of advice do you have for people, since we understand that people are affected differently, given the circumstances, also the demographics from where they come from. What kind of advice can you give as a parting shot? Starting with you, Jane.
I would just say that I hope that people continue to and start to, if they haven't, follow the kind of government guidelines, follow credible sources of information. You know, that this is all about also a lot of misinformation that was being spread. So I know that in the US, a lot of people are following the New York governor, Cuomo, rather than following at times the federal government's daily announcements. And also, you know, taking this time to realize that, of course, these are all sacrifices that we're making, but this is about, you know, our social contract and respecting that and really trying to kind of build out of this really difficult situation for people, either because of health reasons, because they're losing people and they can't organize a funeral, even if somebody is dying from some other related thing. And they're not able to celebrate with one another, even for important moments. So, hope and protect yourselves and others.
Thank you, Jen. Mariam, any words for the as a parting shot to people who are at home right now, or people who find themselves in really tricky situations, given that we come from different demographics?
I know that are suffering. I know how hard it is in Kenya right now, and I know that there's so many people that rely on daily wage income. I know that people still have to pay for their food, for their rent, and there's no parting shot. I mean, like Jane said, we have to respect the guidelines, because if we're not healthy as a society, there'll be no way forward. And this is a very big sacrifice, and it's bigger for some people than for others. And we all recognize that. And unfortunately, it's important. And this too shall pass. And the sooner we have it under control, the sooner we'll be able to move forward and get back to our normal activities. And we just have to recognize that this will pass, keep breathing, and stay positive, and don't lose hope. And this is not the time to get angry with the system. This is not the time to, because this is an enemy that we can't see. This is an enemy that we can't control. This is an illness. This is a virus. We have no control over it. So the only thing we can do is stay positive, stay calm, and look for a better future. And hopefully we'll come out as a better society.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mariam. Guys, that's it. Thank you very much for being part of this very informative and very constructive show. We hope to have this conversation another day as well. We are really glad that we had this conversation. To my fellow countrymen and everyone across the world, I say that it's really important that we observe what the government is telling us. Remember, it is important that we flatten the curve if we are to defeat this virus. And I feel that our guests have done a really nice job, and I would like to appreciate all of them. Mariam, thank you very much for being part of the show.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much for being part of the show. We also have Kama at the moment, but we hope to host him next time on the show. Hi, sir. We hope to have you next time on the show. And I would also like to thank Juliet, who eventually went offline, I think due to connection error. I would also like to thank Cecilia, who will not manage to join us because she had a connection failure. From my end, I say thank you very much. And I also want to urge my country people, remember, it is important to keep social distance. it is important to observe what the government is telling us if we are really going to manage to beat this virus. That's it for today. I hope to have you guys next time, and I am really thankful that we've had this show. Thank you, and thank you very much. See you next time.